welcome to this very special preview edition of our full-length book club for Dr. Patrick Friman's Good Night, Sweet Dreams, I Love You. Now get into bed and go to sleep. For those of you new to the podcast, we typically do episodes on behavior analysis, behavior analytic research, but once a season or every single month this summer of 2024, because we're crazy and wanted to do a summer of book club and we're just reading, we do these book club episodes. So 2025 and half of 2024, it's going to be once a season, we'll be doing book clubs. These episodes are free to hear as they come out for our patrons on patreon.com/ABA Inside Track. For $10 and up subscribers, you get access to these right away, and you get 2 CEs for no charge. You get a special discount code. So if you're listening to this in 2024 and you are a subscriber to Patreon, thank you so much. You're not even hearing this intro because you got the main version. But if you are thinking about joining, or you would like to get some CEs for free or get everything on time, and then next year get to vote on what books we are listening to, again, that's patreon.com/ABA Inside Track. What you're going to hear is the beginning of our book club discussion. We have a lot of book clubs that are on the main free feed that you would be able to access if you want to hear more. But this one is going to go a little bit into our thoughts on the book, whether we'd kind of recommend it, who we'd recommend it for. And then in the full length episode, you will get to hear the full, almost 2-hour discussion of Good Night, Sweet Dreams, I Love You. Now get into bed and go to sleep. So we'll go into the book chapter by chapter, talk about some of the key points of it. It's not quite the same as like an audible audiobook read of the book, but we try to get as close as we can without copyright infringement. So again, we hope you enjoy this preview, and if you like it, you can always subscribe to hear the full audio. All right, let's take it away and hear a preview of that episode. Hey, everybody. Welcome to ABA Inside Track, the podcast that's like reading in your car, but safer. I'm your host, Robert Perry Cruz, and with me, as always, are my fabulous co-hosts.
Hey there, partner. It's Jackie.
And it's me, Diana. Howdy.
Howdy, you stole my line there, Diane. It's Alan, your book club guy.
What? If Alan's here, it must be a book club episode. Yay! I was gonna do like a whole bit and then get into the segue that this is a book club episode, but we recorded a lot of episodes for July, and I am forgetting sometimes how to start the podcast. Do you ever have that moment where you're starting to, like, you're talking and you're doing something you've done a million times, and you're like, I actually don't know what comes next, and you're just saying words and hoping they come out? That's the start of a lot of podcasts this month. It's been a lot of fun recording, but it is hard to remember how to start the show. So we're going to get started talking about behavior analysis and behavior analytic research. In this case, since it's a book club episode, we're going to talk about a book, a whole book. So sit back, relax. So this episode is coming out for patrons in the summer of 2024. If you are not a patron, then you are getting this in the summer of 2025, a year later. That's okay, but then that means you do not have a complete set of the summer of book club that we did this year or last year, whenever you're listening to this. And FOMO, you should probably subscribe.
I mean, Rob finds an incomplete set unacceptable.
I don't know about you, but do you know how many podcasts I have subscribed to their Patreon simply because they were like, and then we did a 3-part series, and part 2 is on the Patreon. And I'm like, well, I guess I got to go there now.
They're numbered. That's the worst.
Oh my God. I've joined like 2, at least 2 is the number. I know, but I love their content, so it all works out.
It's nice to support.
You know what? Support your creators, folks. Support them. So it's me, it's Diana, it's Jackie, it's Alan, and we are here talking about a book that did not win a poll. However, we have put out so many book clubs for this summer of book club that when it came time to say, how do we fill one more slot? We just said, well, what was the second choice book that we all actually wanted to read that didn't win? And let's do that. And so that's what we're doing today. We're going to be talking about Pat Friman's Good Night, Sweet Dreams, I Love You. Now get into bed and go to sleep. From 2005.
Can I just say how funny my child thinks this title is? And it sits in our sunroom where I work, but also where everybody comes in and out of the house. And literally every single morning for the past 3 weeks, all I hear is, good night, sweet dreams, I love you. Now get into bed and go to sleep. So it has been fun. And I'm also excited to finally put this book away so I don't have to hear it tomorrow.
Nice. The cover reminds me of Elf when he's like, Oh, good night. Sweet dreams. I love you. Or I don't know exactly what he says.
I love you. I love you. I love you.
That's
when he's getting the candygram, but when he's getting tucked into bed, I feel like he also like goes through this whole series.
Yeah, you know what? Spoiler alert, Pat Friman's book does not tell us what to do with our adult elf children to get them to go to sleep appropriately.
Nope.
Maybe second edition. We'll see.
I was just going to say it's not to be confused with the Adam Mansbach pseudo children's book. Go the F to sleep.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Alan, you haven't seen the podcast art for this episode, but let's just say I took a little bit from that.
I see.
We have a copy of that somewhere.
That was all the rage for a while to give that to people at their baby showers. So we did end up with one.
I think it peaked when I think it's still available online. LeVar Burton did a public reading of that book in his Reading Rainbow persona, and it was hilarious to watch as an adult who had some Reading Rainbow as a child.
Oh yeah,
That's
I love
amazing.
me some LeVar Burton.
Me too.
Can't get enough.
So why don't we start by talking a little bit about the author, Pat Friman, who...
Patrick C.
Friman.
I'll tell you about him.
PhD.
Jaggie's so excited she's going to read, not verbatim, but she's going to read from the back of the book.
So Patrick Friman works at Boys Town, which we all know because he loves Boys Town and loves to talk about it. As of the time that this book was written, he was the outpatient behavioral pediatric and family service. He was the director of the outpatient behavioral pediatric and family services clinic. He also served as a clinical professor of pediatrics at the University of Nebraska School of Medicine. At the time, he was the editor of JABA. He has authored more than 140 published scientific papers on child behavior and has held faculty appointments at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine, and the University of Nebraska. So this man has moved around. But he's not ended up in the Northeast somehow. I don't know what's he doing.
Well, he's in the Northeast every fall for the Babbitt conference. He's done a keynote every single year I have gone to Babbitt since I was a graduate student.
Is he there every year?
I think he's been there every year. I think he's done a keynote every year.
He hasn't done every year, but it's many years.
He's like he goes. I cannot remember a Babbitt I did not see Pat Friman talk. And it is always like the standing room only. Everyone went to see Pat Friman. It doesn't
get old. Everyone wants to hear him talk. It's like a great way to kick off the conference because, he always has something
he came to our
inspirational to say.
He came to our Babbitt trivia last year. I feel like I have never said hi to Pat Friman, even though I've been to like 15 Babbitts with him there. He was at our trivia event where clearly we are people of some note because we're hosting the trivia. You think I could have gone over and be like, hi, Dr. Friman, it's so great to have you. And I was just still too scared. I just didn't.
I did.
Just couldn't do it.
I asked him. Yeah, I did. I talked to him.
He spoke at for one of the companies I used to work for, and gave a direct training sort of centered around his Circumstances View article that is rather famous.
Yeah.
But just generally, hyping up behavior analysts, especially because he comes from that broader child psychology. And just because I haven't know off the top of my head, I think currently he's been upgraded. He's the vice president of behavioral health at Boys Town. So, ooh.
I thought he was like the mayor of Boys Town at this point. He's been there so long.
This book's almost 20 years old. So
so Boys Town is a Catholic organization, and I'm wondering if he's Catholic. He never talks about his religious affiliation, and I always wonder. I'll ask him next time. So are you Catholic?
Jay, next time you talk to Pat Friman, tell him Rob Perry Cruz really wants to talk to you. He is too scared though. So
I have this note for you, Patrick Friman, that says, "Do you want to be my friend? Circle yes or no." And then I'll talk to Rob. So hopefully, hopefully that will happen for you.
He's funny in the sense that he is a great public speaker and is very amusing to hear, as well as very well spoken. If you're following along with when this comes out, we've just done an episode on public speaking in which Pat Friman is referenced many times with special guest Mandy Ralston. That should have just come out, or it's about to come out. I can't remember where we are on the schedule. But he is one of those kind of folks who is much more about practice And when I think of like great researchers who've published 1 million articles, I don't usually think of Dr. Friman. However, there are so many awesome topics like anxiety, mental health, the context, like you mentioned, Alan, kind of contextualist view. There are so many pieces he's written, and it's like he's sort of like the Velvet Underground, where it's sort of like, well, he doesn't write like prolific tons and tons of research articles, but when he writes one, it is one that comes up so many times. Like it is referenced, to the hilt. He's sort of like the quality over quantity kind of publisher or researcher.
Well, he's authored over 145 articles, Rob. So I think he's got the quantity part down.
Well, yeah, but as of 2005,
as of 2005, and so that circumstances article that Alan was referencing is titled "There's No Such Thing as a Bad Boy," and was a relatively recent publication, 2021, maybe, if anyone's looking to look it up.
No, but I think he's one that
it's
like
really good.
It's like a special, like he publishes something. It's a special event kind of an article. He's not like folks who, and I don't want to like denigrate like folks who are like every month they got another article. Oh my God, I have to read another article, because some folks I think just have such a great breadth, and it's great seeing their publications. But he's one where it's sort of like occasionally you'll see his name as a publication, and man, you better read that article because you know it's going to be good.
Yeah. One other thing though, it should be noted, even though it's called Boys Town, girls can go there now too.
Okay, that is good to know.
Yeah.
Boys Town was referenced.
He's not a professor that has an ongoing research lab for which the purpose of is to continually create new experimental research projects. So you don't see him on those types of publications as often.
Yeah. One thing I remember, because I did not know about this book until maybe like 2012, 2013, I think. I certainly wasn't picking it up in 2005 straight out of college, but I remember hearing at one of the keynotes he did at Babbitt, him talking about sort of his thoughts on the book. In one of his talks, he did mention that there was like a moment when this book came out that he was being, asked to speak on mainstream area, like Good Morning America kind of shows about like, this guy knows about sleep and how do you get to sleep, and how he specifically mentioned, and again, I'm paraphrasing something from probably over 10 years ago, so forgive me if I'm off, but sort of mentioning he didn't want to be the sleep guy. And there was like a hot moment where we could be thinking of Pat Friman as, talking head on any sort of popular news show about sleep. And he specifically did not want to do that. And I'm sort of wondering if that's why we haven't had like a second edition, or if this is just one of those books that the way he wrote it is kind of evergreen in terms of here's how you would handle sleep for most people. The end. There's not much more to say. I don't know.
I think there is more to say than this book says.
Well, in general about sleep, yes.
This is very general. I do want to make a comment that it is not affiliated with the Catholic Church anymore. It used to be Father Flanagan was a Catholic priest that started it, but now it accepts all faiths. So I just wanted to make sure and say someone's going to write in and be like, it actually is not religiously affiliated anymore.
It's not a Catholic school.
It's not a Catholic school, no. So just want to make sure that I clarified my statement after I said it. So
okay, thanks, Jackie.
Thank you, Jackie.
Now, folks listening might say, why are they talking so much about hearing Pat Friman talk when we're talking about a book? And I think part of that is because if you have ever seen Pat Friman talk, this book reads like Pat Friman is hanging out with you and reading the book too. Like it is so written in his speaking style, as much as a writing style can correspond to a speaking style.
He's like,
this felt like
with you. He's like, do you want? Take a minute. I'm going to read. Take a minute. Go get a sip of tea, and then come back.
Like the audiobook version of this, I can't imagine. I mean, I imagine the audiobook version would sound like reading this book was in my head in terms of just hearing his voice. So again, if you don't know who Pat Friman is for some reason, then you'll read this book and be like, oh, this is a good, solid book. It's like a really good kind of intro to basics of sleep and sleep treatment for sort of, the broadest audience possible. And it's written in an entertaining way. But if you have seen Pat Friman talk, this book is very much him. It is very much written in his speaking style, which is something I wish I could write in my speaking style.
You can get some of his, you can get the classic flavor of his speech on YouTube as well. Got a couple good ones up there.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I don't know if he's wearing the sunglasses and the vest and the bow tie, though. That completes the look.
Or he does suspenders a lot. He's a very, very good look. So when it comes to this book, I think the only like downside, and I don't know if it's a downside because it's not part of the purpose of the book, is that this book is very clearly written for like, hey, do you have any sleep problems? Or do you have a young child and you're kind of scared about how will I get my kid to go to sleep? This is a very broadly written book, which is a topic that Dr. Friman talks about a lot. The idea of like, why aren't we using behavior analysis to reach a broad audience rather than just focusing on specific groups? So if you are like, I need specific tips on how to work with this specific type of sleep problem, you may or may not find what you're looking for in this book. If you are like, I want to have a baseline of what are decent, good sleep practices that the average family might use, this is a book for you. So again, if you're looking for like intense sleep treatment, you're not going to find it in this book. And I don't think Dr. Friman is hiding that. I mean, no. he specifically mentions this will cover these issues. It will not cover those.
Well, and sorry, I'm just going to hop in there because I would even say that that's actually a strength of the book, in that if I've referred a parent to this book and they've tried the things in here, it gives me enough information with some further like just behavioral assessment follow-up to be like, all right, then we do need to start investigating more specific interventions for sleep, because these are go-to things I would have parents try before I developed some sophisticated intervention. I would want them to be like, well, here, let's try these sort of tried and true methods to see go with what works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with you, Alan. We did an episode recently with Emily Barron about sleep, and we talked about topics like sleep hygiene and the idea that sleep hygiene is so much more complicated than like, have a set bedtime and here, have a Snuggie for your child. Like there's so much that goes into sleep hygiene. So much of the waking day is related to your sleep hygiene. And while I don't think this book gets into some of those more kind of intensive nuances, it really does think about sleep as a component of your life as a parent of a child or a caregiver of a child, and how that fits into the bigger picture of why is sleep important and what is the purpose of sleep hygiene and sleep procedures of, beyond just, I wish my kid would go to sleep, which I thought was I really didn't expect. I really, I love the format of this book, but I really didn't expect so much sort of big picture. Why does it matter that we get our kids to sleep on time beyond just, medical reasons? Children need sleep to function well.
It's helpful.
I don't know, but Diana, what kind of were your thoughts on reading the book? Diana, I know you agreed that it did read like, a Pat Friman talk. We were talking about that back when we were both reading it.
What are my general thoughts on the book? I enjoyed the book. I think that as someone who has had a lot of kids, whose kids have like gone through all of this, I'm like, oh, some of this maybe I did a good job of, and other things I kind of wish I had read this book back when it came out in 2005, because it would have been with me throughout my entire parenting journey. It's not the only place you can find this information, but he does summarize it in such a conversational way. He's definitely talking to parents in the book, and he's never like judgmental about the challenges that parents face. And I think that there may be questions that you still have remaining from the book, because he tries to cover a lot of ground in a relatively short amount of time, but he does give you a good general like sense of how you might approach sleep challenges for children. And it's a quick read.
Mm-hmm. Jackie, how about you? What did you think about the book?
For me, I actually really like this book. One thing I loved, and it's kind of a spoiler for later on, is that I like the chapters were categorized in like infancy, toddlerhood, elementary years, and then middle school and high school, because you don't think about sleep problems as kids get older, right, as being the same importance of when kids are like infants. Like I never ever am like sitting with a mom's group and they're like, OMG, my middle schooler keeps crying out for me. Right? Like that's just, I haven't heard that. I mean, maybe I'm not in that group yet, but it's, you know, I have friends with middle schoolers and high schoolers, and that's not something we've talked about. So I like that there's, you know, it's not just like, oh, if I have a baby, read this book. It's like, oh, if I have a child, read this book. And so I really liked that. I did find some parts a little snooty, and maybe I was feeling sensitive, but who knows, right? But
how do you mean snooty? Like high horse, or
maybe a little bit, and not the whole book. It was just like maybe when we get to chapters, there's like some lines in it that maybe like rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. But as a overall book, I really enjoyed it, and I would recommend it to people. And maybe it was just feeling sensitive, like because I didn't do that, or who knows. But I was just like, oh, that felt snooty.
Well, okay. And Jackie, what I would say is I think that I definitely saw those lines as well, but I think it's often one of those places where sort of in his speaking style, you see it too, and I get where he's coming from. He's just trying to really hammer home his point authoritatively, but in a conversational way. And I think your interpretation is 100% valid, because I did see that in places as well, because I even earmarked one of them.
Yeah, I did too, and it wasn't like the whole book. I don't think the whole book has a really nice conversational style, like you said, and I think it could be really comforting. But there are a few parts where I just went, huh? Right, like,
yeah.
But
you're always at risk when you use an exclamation point in a book. I think it's like, how is the audience going to take it?
Yeah.
So maybe it was those times when it could definitely could be taken different ways. And the same with attempts at humor, too. Yeah. Some of them felt a little bit like an older generation.
And I mean, it is an old book too, so maybe, you know, like if I would have read it then, I wouldn't have felt that same way. But
right, yeah, and he might write it differently now.
Right.
But overall, I liked it. I liked the conversation.
Yes, I definitely liked it.
I really appreciated how it built on itself in a very effective way, because I think it's very hard when you're writing a book to format the book, to craft the narrative where you're giving information, you're building on information that came before, and there's a sense there's a through line through your entire book rather than just the sense the book is building. Like I'm sure, and I think we've had some on the book club where it feels like they're talking about these basic concepts, and then they're going to build on those concepts. And then at some point, they just add so many concepts, you're like, I don't remember what this book is even about, and it's very frustrating to read. Whereas this book, I think, really threaded that needle of building on itself while still using a format that didn't get too boring. So I think that's the other problem you can have with the book, where you're like, I'm going to be very slavish to, here are the points I will make in every single chapter. So, you know, the book's set up very much to be, you know, what are sleep problems and treatments for infancy versus toddlerhood versus elementary versus middle high school. And it keeps coming back to the same themes in each chapter. And that could be very boring, but I found that there was just enough repetition and novelty per chapter to leave me always feeling like I was learning something new while still kind of coming back to those key components of why is it important that we get our kids to go to sleep on time beyond just, well, because don't you want to get enough sleep? Like, we're humans, we need to have X amount of sleep at this point in our development. Like, it went beyond just sort of the medical need for sleep, which I thought was very cool. And I really did appreciate just that format. And it never got boring in that way or overwhelming.
Great. Yeah. Cool. Alan, your turn.
I was just gonna say some points that I really liked in sort of his style, especially, is that he's efficient in very many places. Of like, I could really pad out the length of this book by repeating advice I've already given, where instead he's like, and I addressed that in this chapter on like. So please go, like, refer back to there, because he is talking about, as you say, he's got it structured sort of the life cycle of the child. And so sometimes, like, so just revisit that method you tried before if a new problem pops up. So I think that's also sort of what's nice about it. I don't see what was I think in terms of big picture, one thing I would love to hear him talk about or update the book on would just be electronic media and bedtime interference. because I think even some of the recommendations that he has about like coupons and motivation would be more complicated to implement with electronic media in the picture.
Yeah, that's a great point, Alan. I know, like our oldest child is in high school and he has a phone, and we didn't watch it as much as we should have. So we're trying to do a better job with our middle child who has a phone as well. And he is very understanding of I shouldn't have a phone in my bed. Like we've talked about the reasons why. We've talked about where it gets charged. It's supposed to live outside. But then he brings up, but I want to wake up. I want to start doing like, some extra activities in the summer. And so he wants to use it as an alarm clock. And even small subtleties like that, like, is he really using it as an alarm clock? Or, he reads a lot of books. Like the schools are great at giving kids access to lots of books on an iPad. So when he wants to read some of these books, we're excited he wants to read, but he's got to do it on a screen. Yeah. Which means if he wants to read before he goes to bed, well, he's got to bring a screen to bed. And, we have plenty of paper books and everything. But if he has something he really wants to read, it's really hard to tell a kid, no, you're not allowed to read the book you're super interested in because it's on a screen. Because that is a subtlety I don't think preteens and young teenagers quite understand.
And for me, it's even the idea that like certain paces of media, I think, will interfere with bed more than others. Because so for that, I think there could be a technological recommendation of we'll put those books on an e-reader or something. I'm thinking about especially young children who almost seem to rely on electronic media as like a self-regulation strategy. And so it directly interferes with like winding down for bed, because if they don't have access to this device, they seem to be more escalated, but accessing the device interferes with their sleep. And so coming up with a behavioral intervention that's as trauma informed as Pat Friman really tries to be, I think would be really beneficial for a lot of parents. And for us professionals.
Yeah. I mean, we're coming up on 20th anniversary. Perhaps there'll be a special extra edition. I haven't heard anything. Because I didn't talk to Pat Friman and ask him questions like that because I was too scared. I probably should have.
I'll write that also. I will be like, do you want to be Rob's friend? Circle yes or no. Are you going to do an updated edition of your book? Circle yes or no.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I want. Thank you, Jackie. I appreciate that.
Good. I'll work on that. I'll drive to
Nebraska. You work on that.
Because obviously I have to give him that note in person.
Yeah. Whew. All right. Well, so overall, I think this is a book we were all very positive on. But let's take a little break, and when we come back, let's get into the book itself in more detail and talk about some of the pros, the cons, the things we would update, and the tips that Dr. Friman has. Thank you so much for listening to our special preview of our Good Night, Sweet Dreams. I love you. Now get into bed and go to sleep book club. If you want to hear the full nearly 2-hour discussion, as well as get access to all of the book clubs you've ever done, you can subscribe at the $10 and up level on patreon.com/ABA Inside Track. If you're not sure if you want to, we do eventually release these on the free feed about a year in, so you could also wait until summer 2025 to hear the full discussion. But if you want it now and you want 2 CEs for no additional charge, that's patreon.com/ABA Inside Track as a thank you to folks who kind of keep our show going. But otherwise, we hope you enjoyed the preview. And if you're not into the book clubs, don't worry. We'll be back with another full-length episode later this week. But until then, keep responding, and good night.